Howdy, howdy. So I sketched out a quick list of things I want to cover about bounces. Just a regular bounce, what a bounce is. These through bounces, it's a cool idea. Bouncing and turning, combining those and the weird effect that it has. Bouncing both poi at once, and then double, triple, quadruple bounce sequences. And then these things, tracers and Lovelace tracers. And then how wraps can start applying to bounces. And then just as like a bonus thing, through wraps. So I'm going to try to get through all that in this video. Bam. So we'll start with bounces. What a bounce is. When I'm talking about bounces, I'm talking about taking this part of your tether, where the head and the tether meet, and hitting a part of your body that's perpendicular to the plane that the poi's spinning in. And if you hit it just the right spot, it'll rebound back. It'll have its own momentum. It feels right when it happens. So just experiment until you get this, and you'll know when it hits. It feels perfect. It has a cool feeling to it. So get that going with both of them. And that's just your bounce. And you'll notice I'm doing it on my forearm right now, putting my forearm perpendicular to the plane that the poi's spinning in, and bouncing that sweet spot on the tether off of my body. Now let's think about all the different ways you can bounce it. So I can put my arm like this, perpendicular, or my bicep, or I can lift my leg and get my thigh. I can do that. Or I can bend my knee and get my shin at the top of my thigh. Or I can put my leg back like this and get my shin. Or I can go forward and put my foot forward, and I got this. My foot makes a 90 to the plate. So those are some of the variations of places you can get perpendicular to that orbit, right? And though, as I was demonstrating most of that in wall, you can also like put your leg out like this and make it work in wheel plane. Same with my foot. So you can make that work there. Bicep works here. Reach across with the other one. So you can move your limbs creatively to get them perpendicular to the plane in order to get that bounce to work. A quick little side note is that you can change plane while bouncing. It is technically a 0 point. There's a moment where it stops. So once it does, you can move your hand like a bend, and then the plane will come out the poi will come out in its new orbit. So that's just a thing to keep in mind. You can use bounces to correct your plane or change your plane into to move into a new plane as you see fit using bounces. Next thing on my list is through bounces. So we'll talk about, you can put your hand in your hand's going to be in a line to the body part that's bouncing, right? There's going to be a line from the tether, from your hand, the center of rotation, to whatever it's bouncing on. You can make that horizontal, like this, or your hand can be vertical above it, or it's kind of awkward but down below it. With my leg, I could have my center of rotation right here parallel to it horizontally, or I can do it above my leg like this. I can even reach all the way over and do it horizontally over here. So where your hand is when the poi enters the bounce changes the aesthetic a little bit. So that's another variable for when you're coming up with your own bounce sequences. You can take into account where your hand will be during that sequence and the way it makes the pattern look. It'll be a little bit different for each different variable. And that's awesome because that gives us lots of stuff to play with. Through bounce is when you move the center of rotation in a straight line through the bounce. So if my hand is below it, like in this horizontal, it's going to be horizontal right here. I'm going to move my hand continuously up, and it almost gives it like an anti-spin look. And now I'm going to do it from the top down. So I'm just bringing the plane through the bouncing body part, And it gives it that anti-spin kind of look, which is cool. It's just another way you can use these bounces to make different visual effects. And you can do those in various patterns. Okay. And then the next one I almost just did would be a bounce with a turn. The interesting thing about bounces, if you just do one bounce, ones are odd, threes are odd, fives are odd, twos, fours, just like plane bend, odd numbers switch direction. So if I do one bounce, switch direction, two, and I stay the same, right? So I double up two bounces, one, two. Then I'm in the same direction as I started. If I do one, opposite direction. If I do three, opposite direction. If I was to do four, you can see where this is going. Same direction as when I initiate the 4-bounce sequence. So that happens with bounces, right? Now there's the relativity of turning. This is moving to my left. If I turn, now it's moving to my right. So if I bounce, now this is moving to my right. If I turn, now it's moving to my left. I bounce, my right, my left. So you can use a turn to cancel out the direction change caused by a bounce. And you can link these in very fun ways. Because normally if I did a bounce and I didn't turn off the bottom, my next bounce would be off the top, right? If I turn, it's bottom, bottom, bottom. So check it out. Bottom, 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 or top, 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 top. So that's a fun thing to do with bounces. Bam, bam, top, top, bam, bam, top, 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 switch, bottom, 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 bottom. So there's ways to link those up to make cool patterns and fun things to perform. And then double bounce would be just both poi at once. So that's like, instead of just taking one poi and bouncing it at a time, you'd be bouncing both poi at a time, which I've kind of demonstrated a little before, both off my upper arm through bounces. You could do both off the bottoms or both off the tops. Oops. And so I could go, my right hand is going to go to my non-native, my left is going to go to the other non-native, right? Opposite. Ooh, that was a tangle. Opposite direction now because the direction changed. Now it's going to be native, 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 non-native, native, non-native, and you can sequence those. And then you can do the same thing off the bottom. And so that's both of them at the same time, or you could do it like this, or top. So those are both poi at the same time bounces you can do. This is one that I love, is this, my blue will go to my shin, my red will go to my arm, and then I'll repeat it. And you could do it on the same shin instead of changing. That one just feels really good to me. That's a double bounce from the shin to under the arm. So those, you'll find ones that feel cool to you. They're fun to perform. Some are more fun to perform than other ones, and then some just look awesome. So play around, see which ones fit your style and the ones that you have the most fun doing, and then spend your time with those ones. That's kind of combos, so take now we have all the pieces, right? We can do any number of bounces at any different part of our body. So we take the pieces and combine them in ways that we think are cool looking. So I'll go bottom, bottom, one circle in the middle, bottom, bottom, one circle in the middle, shin, shin, circle in the middle, shin, shin. See, and now we just memorize that and then try it out. Oops, shin, shin. Kind of looked neat, outside, shin, outside, bottom. Okay, that was kind of fun. There you go, that's a sequence. Mess around with them until you find one that you think is particularly cool, and then memorize it. There's a great number of them. So start exploring now, because there's a lot of them, and they're really cool looking when you get them smooth and everything. That's what makes glow stringing look so wild, is those guys are really good at bouncing. Another thing you can do with the bounces is a trace, and I'm only going to show you on my knee because that's the only one I'm really good at. But you could perform a bounce as soon as the bounce happens, draw a circle, dragging the tether around your knee or whatever you bounced off. Some people do like this. You can draw a circle around that. Click. Like I said, I'm not great at it. But the knee one, I really like that one. That one feels good and smooth to me. That one I was showing you earlier. This one, because that bounces off the knee, you can easily add that tracer into it, like that. And I love the way that feels. Another thing you can do, is get them both to bounce off your knees and double trace. Wait, I don't know if you can see that way back there. I'm hitting the side of the. You can trace the same knee. You can also do split time. So there's all sorts of different things you can experiment with. Get really good at those. You know, that will probably look awesome when they're performed smoothly. And now we'll go into wraps, because wraps correlate with bounces really well, because at the end of a wrap is usually a bounce. So simple wrap, just wrap it around your hand and then bounce it. Let's go in the other direction. So you can make little spirals with one hand and use that to switch direction. You can do spirals in both hands, like so, and that has a pretty cool look. Spiral wrap around both hands. So you can see this from the side. They're both kind of wrapping along the same spot of my wrist. You could do one with just a one hand wrap like that, and the other one you wrap around the non-native hand, and so you can get a spiral that way. Show you from the front. It's a slightly different looking spiral than the double. That kind. And you could just do one, switch direction, wrap it all the way around. The bounce will happen at the end. I'm moving when the wrap happens, this is your new center of rotation. So you have to kind of move it up and down to make the poi, to give new inertia to the poi or new momentum. So it'll wrap, and then the hand becomes my new center of rotation. Other places you could wrap is like your leg, or you could wrap your other arm into a bounce off the native hand. So I'll do a bounce with this hand, but I'm going to put my arm in the way, like that. So the tether's wrapping around my arm and then bouncing off the native hand. And that one, I appreciate that one in body tracing, because you could do a body tracing pattern where your hand is tracing your arm and I'm in opposite directions, and then I could, while never taking my hand off my arm, switch from same direction to opposite and keep tracing the whole time. So that is kind of an interesting little thing to play with. Like that. You can also do that same kind of wrap and bounce off the native hand around your leg. Even you could do, if your poi is long enough, the tether, you could do it around your neck, and you use the native hand to bounce off of. I got my headphones on, so that's shady. Oh, there they go. And then the final thing we'll talk about is a through wrap. So with a through wrap, we'll go to the first wrap example around the hand. A through wrap is a combination of the bounce turn thing and a wrap. The reason is because of the direction change of the turn, right? So it wraps up. This is spinning, let's say, to my right. We'll wrap up. If I was to let it bounce, it'd be spinning to my left. Spinning to my right. If I turn, it keeps spinning to my right. It'll unwind the spiral. I'll wrap it on the other way and turn, and it'll keep spinning to the right. So by linking this, you get a perpetual spiral, winding and unwinding over and over. And that's the through wrap concept. Right before the bounce, move it through and it'll unwrap. Before the bounce, move it through, unwrap. So you could use that on your so where native hand is moving across, you can also do it with your non-native hand. Just intercept the tether and drag it to the other side. Drag it through. That's where through wrap comes from. I'll show you from this angle. Intercept, drag it through. Intercept and drag. Intercept, drag. Intercept, drag. And you can allow an extra full wrap. And then that gives you, when it's fully wrapped, that's when the wrap point becomes your new center of rotation. So you got to start thinking about it that way. You can also do these through wraps around your foot. So kick it through, wrap around. Oh, you can't see that. Wrap around, kick it through. Unclick both sides. So those are the through wraps. You could even get wild with it and do like the straight jacket through wrap, where the poi comes through the negative space, and then you turn, and it'll come out of that same negative space. It wraps around your arm. It's just like this one, but instead of letting it go to the outside, like I just did with my pinky to this side, we allow the poi to go into that negative space, right here, and then this hand drags it across, and it'll come out in reverse. So it looks like this. Wrapping on my non-native hand, it becomes the movement, the motion is generated from my non-native hand, and it flings it all the way across so it can come out in reverse, right there. You know, practice that a bunch, and then that'll open the door into the straight jacket world. Straight jacket doesn't, it's a little different. That. Clearly, I'm not great at straight jacket. I don't know, but that's for a different tutorial after I've practiced it more. That should get you started on bounces of turns, bounce combinations, wraps with bounces, and through wraps. That gives you a huge palette of ideas to start creating your own patterns with. So hopefully that is inspiring enough that you go play right now and come up with some awesome shit. Have fun.